Ethiopian state-sponsored assassinations, the Oromo experience. The Horn of Africa bears the scars of a tumultuous past, marked by conflict, power struggles, and systematic oppression. Among the region's many tragedies, the plight of the Oromo people stands as a stark reminder of the human cost of political violence. For over a century, the Oromo, Horn of Africa's largest nation, have endured persecution, marginalization, and targeted assassinations at the hands of successive Ethiopian regimes. This presentation highlights the dark history of state-sponsored violence against the Oromo, examining the motives behind these assassinations and their broader implications for human rights and regional stability. The systematic targeting of Oromo leaders is not a recent phenomenon. It began with the creation of Ethiopia as a dependent colonial empire at the end of the 19th century by European colonial powers. Since then, state-sponsored political assassinations have been deeply rooted in Ethiopia's history of imperial expansion and the subsequent struggle for control over land, resources, and political power. By silencing dissenting voices and eliminating potential threats to their authority, Ethiopian rulers have sought to maintain their grip on power and suppress any form of opposition, particularly from the Oromo people.
Identity, territory, and struggle. Understanding the plight of the Oromo people requires an appreciation of their history, culture, and the vast territory they inhabit. The Oromo are a Cushitic-speaking people primarily concentrated in Ethiopia and parts of Kenya, Somalia, and Djibouti. The Oromo people and Oromiyaa, their homeland, are one of the largest nations in the Horn of Africa and have a long and proud history. Historically, the Oromo people were organized into a sophisticated system of governance known as the Gadaa system, a democratic socio-political structure that emphasized consensus building and power sharing. The Oromo people's historical homeland, Oromiyaa, encompasses a massive portion of present-day Ethiopia, including fertile agricultural lands and crucial water resources. This region's strategic importance and resource wealth have made it a focal point of conflict and contention throughout history, attracting the attention of neighboring empires and internal power struggles.
Colonization and subjugation. The late 19th century, a period known as the Scramble for Africa, saw European powers vying for control over the continent, often exploiting internal divisions to further their interests. Menelik II's forces were armed with superior weaponry supplied by these European powers. Through a combination of military conquest, political maneuvering, and alliances with European powers, Menelik II's forces subjugated the Oromo, dismantling their traditional Gadaa system and incorporating their lands into the Ethiopian Empire. This period marked the beginning of a long and painful era of colonization for the Oromo people, characterized by loss of their sovereignty, the colonization of their nation, land dispossession, forced assimilation, and the suppression of their cultural identity. The Oromo were subjected to serfdom, forced labor, denial of the use of their language, and cultural assimilation policies.
Oromo resilience and defiance. Despite these oppressive measures, the Oromo people did not passively accept their subjugation. From the late 19th century through the early decades of the 20th century, numerous Oromo uprisings and rebellions challenged the Ethiopian Empire's authority. These acts of resistance were expressions of the Oromo's enduring spirit and their unwavering commitment to preserving their identity, culture, and autonomy. One of the most notable uprisings was the Bale Revolt, which erupted in the 1960s. The Bale Oromo, led by General Waku Gutu, mounted a formidable armed resistance against the imperial government of Haile Selassie. The revolt was fueled by grievances over land dispossession, economic exploitation, and cultural repression. Although the revolt was ultimately suppressed, it became a symbol of Oromo resilience and defiance. Other significant resistance movements include the Arsi Oromo's rebellion in the early 20th century and the enduring struggles in the Hararge and Walaga regions. These uprisings, though often brutally quashed, demonstrated the Oromo people's relentless pursuit of justice and self-determination. They laid the groundwork for future generations to continue the fight against oppression. The legacy of these early resistances is a testament to the Oromo's indomitable will and their ongoing struggle for freedom. These historical acts of defiance serve as a powerful reminder of the sacrifices made by countless Oromo individuals to protect their land, culture, and rights against an oppressive regime. The story of the Oromo resistance is not just one of conflict, but also of resilience, unity, and an unyielding quest for justice. It is a crucial chapter in the broader narrative of the Oromo people's history and their ongoing struggle for self-determination.
Early assassinations. The subjugation of the Oromo people under Menelik II's rule was met with resistance. Oromo leaders and communities rose up against the Ethiopian Empire, defending their lands, traditions, and right to self-determination. However, these acts of defiance were ruthlessly crushed, and dissent was met with brutal reprisals. During this period, numerous Oromo leaders were targeted for assassination, eliminating potential threats to the nascent Ethiopian Empire's authority. Political assassinations have been a grim feature of Ethiopian history, particularly targeting the Oromo people. These targeted killings are a systemic strategy employed to crush opposition and maintain power. By eliminating influential leaders, the Ethiopian government aimed to dismantle Oromo movements for self-determination and human rights. These early assassinations, often carried out covertly or under the guise of maintaining order, served as a chilling message to the Oromo people. Any opposition to the Ethiopian state would be met with swift and deadly force. These assassinations create a climate of fear, discouraging open dissent or challenges to colonial rule. The message is clear. Opposition to colonial rule and challenges to the regime can be fatal. This tactic has had a devastating impact on the Oromo nation, robbing them of their leaders and perpetuating a cycle of violence and repression.
A state terror. Throughout the 20th century, Oromo leaders were targeted and assassinated as a warning to other potential Oromo leaders. For instance, Haile Mariam Gamada, a prominent intellectual and lawyer, was assassinated by Ethiopian government forces due to his strong stance on Oromo rights and his involvement in nationalist activities. Another prominent Oromo intellectual, Mamo Mezimir, was targeted and eventually killed by hanging after he was convicted on false claims. His true crime was that he produced a draft of the History of the Oromo, advocated for Oromo rights, and established an organizational link between the Macha Tulama Association and the Bali Oromo armed struggle. As Oromo nationalism grew, so did the state's determination to crush it. Leaders who dared to speak out against oppression were silenced. These early assassinations highlighted the Ethiopian state's willingness to use violence against the Oromo people. They also served as a rallying cry for the Oromo people, strengthening their resolve to fight for their rights. From armed struggles to peaceful protests, the Oromo people's fight for justice has been unwavering.
State terror and the Oromo struggle. The overthrow of Emperor Haile Selassie in 1974 and the subsequent rise of the Derg, a Marxist-Leninist military junta, did little to alleviate the suffering of the Oromo people. The Derg, led by Mengistu Haile Mariam, unleashed a reign of terror known as the Red Terror, targeting political opponents, ethnic groups, and anyone perceived as a threat to its authority. The Oromo people, already marginalized and oppressed, bore the brunt of the Derg's brutality. The Derg regime viewed the Oromo Liberation Front, formed in 1973, as a significant threat to its rule. The OLF advocated for the self-determination of the Oromo people, seeking greater autonomy and an end to their marginalization. The Derg responded with ruthless force, targeting suspected OLF members and sympathizers, leading to widespread human rights abuses, including extrajudicial killings, torture, and disappearances. For example, Reverend Gudina Tumsa, an influential religious leader and an outspoken critic of the Derg regime's policies towards the Oromo and other marginalized groups, was abducted and assassinated in 1979. The renowned Oromo intellectual Haile Fida was arrested, subjected to severe torture, and was eventually executed by the Derg regime the same year.
Post-1991, new government, old tactics. The fall of the Derg regime in 1991 brought hope for a more democratic Ethiopia. The EPRDF, led by Meles Zenawi, promised peace, stability, and respect for human rights. However, these promises proved hollow for the Oromo people. Under the EPRDF's rule, Ethiopia experienced rapid economic growth and development. However, this progress came at a cost, particularly for the Oromo people. The EPRDF's development model often involved land grabs, displacement, and environmental degradation, disproportionately impacting Oromo communities. Those who dared to speak out against these injustices faced intimidation, harassment, arbitrary detention, and even enforced disappearances. The EPRDF regime skillfully utilized its security apparatus to silence dissent and maintain control. The regime employed a vast network of informants, security forces, and draconian laws, such as the Anti-Terrorism Proclamation of 2009, to stifle any form of opposition. This law, broadly defined and arbitrarily applied, allowed the government to label peaceful activists, journalists, and political opponents as terrorists, justifying their detention, torture, and silencing. Many prominent Oromo figures were assassinated. Engineers Mesfin Abibi Abdisa and Tesfahun Kamada were abducted from Kenya and killed. Dabasa Guyu, a prominent Oromo leader, was abducted from Nairobi, Kenya, and assassinated under suspicious circumstances. These actions created a climate of fear and impunity, discouraging dissent and perpetuating a cycle of violence. The government sought to maintain its dominance and control over the Oromo people by silencing those who could articulate the Oromo people's grievances, mobilize support for their cause, or challenge the EPRDF's grip on power.
Contemporary assassinations fueling the cycle of violence. The rise of Abiy Ahmed to power in 2018, initially hailed as a new dawn for Ethiopia, brought a brief respite from the worst excesses of the EPRDF. Abiy released political prisoners and promised reforms. However, this period of optimism was short-lived. Abiy's regime fueled ethnic tensions that were suppressed under previous regimes to implement its policy of divide and rule. The Oromo people were brutally targeted and faced violence and persecution. Targeted killings and political repression were particularly heightened under Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed. Assassinations of Oromo leaders and activists continued at a rapid pace under Abiy's rule. Concerns about the government's lack of commitment to protecting human rights and ensuring justice were renewed around the free world. Despite promises of reform, the Oromo people remain vulnerable to continued violence and oppression. At present, it is estimated that more than 100,000 Oromo nationals from every walk of life are imprisoned by the Abiy regime without due process.
Koree Nageenya, Ethiopia's Secretive Killing Committee. The Koree Nageenya is a controversial paramilitary group allegedly formed at the behest of Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed under the directive of Shimelis Abdisa, president of the Oromiyaa state. Other members of the group include Fekadu Tesema, Ararsa Mardaasa, Awalu Abdi, and others, all senior officials in the ruling Prosperity Party and Oromiyaa regional state. The group is a secretive committee that has ordered extrajudicial killings and illegal detentions to crush an insurgency there. The Koree Nageenya emerged as part of the broader political and security apparatus under the administration of Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed. While ostensibly created to maintain order and combat insurgency, the group's activities have often been linked to serious human rights abuses and violations. One of the most egregious cases attributed to Koree Nageenya is the Karayu Aba-Gadaa massacre. In December 2021, security forces believed to be under the directive of Koree Nageenya carried out a brutal massacre in the Karayu district of Oromiyaa, targeting the Aba-Gadaa, traditional Oromo leaders, and community members. The attack resulted in numerous deaths and injuries, with survivors recounting harrowing tales of violence and terror. The targeting of traditional leaders like the Aba-Gadaas has been seen as an attempt to undermine Oromo cultural and political structures. Koree Nageenya represents a significant and troubling aspect of Ethiopia's current political dynamics. Its operations have far-reaching implications for the region's stability, national relations, and international standing.
Activities, operations, and notable assassinations. The Koree Nageenya is known for its aggressive tactics, including extrajudicial killings, abductions, and intimidation of political opponents. According to a detailed report by Reuters, Koree Nageenya decides that a person needs to be detained. Then they go and arrest them without warrant or investigation or due process. Koree Nageenya not only eliminates suspected enemies, but it also acts preemptively to keep protesters off the streets. This group has gained infamy for its targeted killings, including the high-profile murder of the Karayu Gadaa leaders, traditional leaders of the Karayu Oromo community. The killing shocked the nation and drew widespread condemnation, but the regime remains defiant and acts with impunity. Koree Nageenya operations are typically clandestine, making it challenging to hold them accountable for their actions. It is widely believed that they engaged in the 2020 assassination of prominent Oromo singer and activist Hachalu Hundessa. Hachalu's music gave voice to Oromo grievances and aspirations, making him a target for the state. His assassination sparked widespread protests across Oromiyaa, resulting in a brutal government crackdown. Koree Nageenya also likely directed the August 2021 assassination of prominent Oromo lawyer Abdul Jabbar Hussein. Koree Nageenya and the Republican Guard are also implicated in the April 2024 heinous and brutal killing of Batai Ugasa. Batai Ugasa was a prominent Oromo political figure, human rights activist, and man of peace.
The aftermath and ongoing impact. The Koree Nageenya's actions have left a lasting scar on the Oromo community and Ethiopian society at large. The brutality and impunity associated with their operations have fostered an atmosphere of pervasive fear and mistrust. Families of the victims live in constant anxiety, haunted by the memories of their loved ones and the uncertainty of their own safety. The psychological toll is immense, with communities experiencing widespread trauma and a deep-seated sense of injustice. Beyond the immediate victims, the Koree Nageenya's actions have had a ripple effect, undermining the social fabric of Oromo society. Traditional structures and leadership have been destabilized, leading to a loss of cultural continuity and community cohesion. The targeting of figures like the abo-wbo has disrupted the transmission of knowledge and traditions, creating a cultural void that is difficult to fill.
Human rights violations. Ethiopian government's continued use of violence against the Oromo people, including the assassinations of Oromo leaders and activists, has drawn condemnation from international human rights organizations and governments worldwide. The United Nations, Amnesty International, and Human Rights Watch have documented extensive evidence of these targeted killings, calling for independent investigations and accountability. Despite these concerns and repeated calls for restraint, the Ethiopian government often dismissed these criticisms as foreign interference or attempts to destabilize the country. This lack of accountability has only emboldened the perpetrators and perpetuated the cycle of violence. The international community must continue to pressure the Ethiopian government to end its repression of the Oromo people, ensure justice for victims, and allow for independent investigations into various crimes perpetrated against the Oromo people. Current and previous Ethiopian regimes are feared to have committed genocide, war crimes, crimes against humanity, and the crime of aggression in Oromiyaa.
The Oromo struggle for freedom. Despite decades of oppression, the Oromo people have demonstrated remarkable resilience and determination in their struggle for freedom. Their demands have evolved from seeking greater autonomy within a federal Ethiopia to aspiring for full independence. Methods of resistance have diversified, encompassing peaceful protests, civil disobedience, and armed struggle. Grassroots movements and community organizations within Oromiyaa tirelessly advocate for justice and accountability, organizing protests and documenting abuses. The Oromo diaspora plays a crucial role by leveraging their positions abroad to mobilize international support, raise awareness, and challenge the Ethiopian government's narrative through social media, advocacy campaigns, and lobbying efforts. International human rights organizations, including the United Nations, Amnesty International, and Human Rights Watch, have documented extensive abuses and called for independent investigations and accountability. The Oromo community's demand for justice transcends retribution, aiming to restore dignity, preserve cultural heritage, and build a future where all live free from fear. Their resilience and determination to seek justice serve as a beacon of hope amidst adversity. The struggle continues, fueled by the unwavering spirit of the Oromo people. Their fight for freedom is a testament to their enduring strength and commitment to their rights and identity. support from the international community remains crucial in ensuring the Oromo people's quest for justice and freedom is recognized and respected, highlighting the broader implications for human rights and regional stability.
No one is free until we are all free. The state-sponsored assassinations of Oromo leaders represent a tragic and enduring pattern of violence. These targeted killings have had devastating consequences for the Oromo people. Addressing this legacy requires a comprehensive approach. The Ethiopian government must acknowledge past atrocities and engage in meaningful dialogue. The international community has a crucial role in supporting these efforts. The path to peace requires confronting the legacy of violence and ensuring justice. No one is free unless we are all free. Thank you for watching Ethiopian state-sponsored assassinations, the Oromo experience. This video was produced and presented by BIRMADUU Media. Special thanks to all contributors and supporters. Please subscribe, follow, join, and like us on our various social platforms.